This is a review that I'm hesitant in starting. Usually, I just let what I write be just that and nothing else. It's easier for me to sit down and put together a review for the latest pay-per-view event that doesn't have as much attached to it emotionally as this show does. I almost didn't even write up a review at all under the impression that it would just be a bad look if I thought the show were a dud for some reason. But then again, even saying it now, I don't think it would have been possible for the show to be a dud, because in order for me to truly believe that it is, then this tribute would have had to have been tasteless in some way, considering how every single match that took place was so strongly influenced by its purpose of both remembering Hana Kimura and believing that we'll see her again somewhere down the line. I'm not sure that any tribute show, for that matter, can come out to be a bad show, so as long as it comes from a good place, you know? And I guess in some way I was worried going into the show that I would be, I don't know, let down. Or maybe a combination of that and emotionally drained, having to be confronted with a reality that's better left unspoken for as long as possible. When Hana Kimura passed, in a way, my love for pro wrestling took a hit unlike anything else. Comparatively, I know that there had to have been thousands of wrestling fans who tuned out of pro wrestling as a whole due to the Benoit tragedy of 2007, an incident that almost resulted in the end of WWE as we knew it, if not navigated through properly. And no, in no way am I comparing both events, just the nature surrounding them and that wrestling got a little bit too real. I'd make the correlation between Hana and Eddie rather than Benoit if the circumstances were different. Eddie's passing, if anything while tragic, wasn't as dark as Hana Kimura taking her own life. Even if it wasn't completely natural, Eddie passed away due to more natural circumstances than, say, someone who was bullied into suicide. While Benoit's case was a lot more detrimental to wrestling at the time that it happened, before WWE as a whole took the aftermath of what he did as a reason to course correct, even if it was only ever to save their own asses, we don't see wrestlers juicing or walking off concussions like there wouldn't be any consequence to it anymore. I'd go as far as to say that someone like Edge might legitimately have been in a wheelchair now, if not for the crucial changes that WWE made in their wellness policy after the Benoit tragedy, to prevent others like what could have very well happened with Edge if he were just allowed to continue without any concern. I believe that one crucial way to heal from tragic events is to get to a point where you can grow from such events. In Benoit's case, wrestlers like Daniel Bryan were able to heal from their head trauma under a forced retirement, and what happened to Eddie had to have reinforced that mandate for better health protocols in wrestling, more so after what happened with Benoit. In the case of Hana Kimura, it's the importance of being nicer to each other, especially online. But with all that being said, that wasn't what the show was necessarily about. This event was, in a way, a celebration of Hana Kimura's life and career. When the news broke of her passing, it pained me to see the internet monetize it by making her name a worldwide headline as not Hana Kimura, but as Hana Kimura the reason why cyberbullying is bad. It hurt to see even worse headlines on YouTube videos monetizing her story with the same exaggerated thumbnails that you'd see in just about any YouTuber's video category designed to get clicks rather than to remember the person. Unfortunately, Hana Kimura became a headline for a while and not much else. This event, thankfully taking place after the hysteria that surrounded her passing, was a return to form of Hana that most of her fans knew and remembered her as, Hana Kimura the wrestler, and subsequently through this show, Hana Kimura the daughter, friend, and most importantly of all, the person. I don't know much else I can say about this show other than it's by far and away the most heartfelt, uplifting, and genuine memorial events that I've ever seen in wrestling, given that it came almost entirely under the banner of her own mother, not a wrestling promotion. With Eddie and Benoit, their tribute shows were still WWE shows at the end of the day. With Hana, all of this was a labor of love from top to bottom, putting Hana's interest ahead of everything else. Her musical interests were on display with her favorite DJ doing a live set near the open of the show, to the dance group that I believe she was a member of that came afterwards performing a dance routine dedicated to Hana in her memory, to the wrestlers that performed on the show being made up almost entirely of her personal favorites to watch like Habu, who kicks ass by the way, and her friends, some of which who made the return to the ring in Kagetsu and Hazuki. This show, from top to bottom, was a memorial event driven purely and almost exclusively out of love for Hana Kimura and what she meant to so many people in wrestling. It's just a shame that such a large part of you wishes that this show never had to happen in the first place, and that Hana was still here, probably main eventing Stardom's recent huge All-Star Dream Cinderella show, beating Julia for the white belt. Honestly, even if she chose to quit wrestling completely and was never competing on that show to begin with, anything's better as long as she's still here, because clearly she had such a large family around the world that thought the world of her. I debated getting into the story of the night that I found out about what was happening with Hana in real time, but I don't feel it's all that appropriate for this review specifically, at least not the story in long form. This event was so dedicated to her life that discussing the circumstances of her death, even on the 1 year anniversary of the tragedy, is a story best saved for another day, perhaps even on another show. It's a story that mostly revolves around what she meant to me as a fan of her work, and by proxy what it meant for me as a fan of wrestling, to see so many disgusting things that happened surrounding her passing online that almost drove my passion for wrestling as a whole into the ground. Almost. Every match on this show was such a touching tribute to her life in their own way. From the opening tag team match made up of some of her all-time favorite wrestlers, again, Habu rules, to the hilarious battle royal that came after it, and the double main event that featured Oedo Tai and Tokyo Cyber Squad teaming up in a match that subsequently led to a surprise single match between Kagetsu and Veni. Each match had a certain feel to it, as they were also driven by the life of Hana Kimura. Wrestling had a purpose on the show unlike any that I have ever seen before. Every botch, miscue, slip-up, or screw-up had no effect on any of the matches, even amidst the crowd forced to shut their mouths and clap their hands due to this fucking pandemic that we're still in the middle of. Korakuen Hall has never felt so heavy, and yet not nearly as dainty or as beautiful as a flower. After the matches were all said and done, my opinion of the show wasn't in doubt whatsoever. But what came after the matches is where some of Hana's more hardcore fans lost all control and cried their eyes out completely. Now for me personally, it's the original Oedo Tai theme song that got me a little misty. I can never get to those damn flutes without breaking after the first Stardom show that took place after Hana passed, and the current members of Oedo Tai stood together in a moment of silence as the theme song played in the background. Here, I would imagine for the fans that knew her for far longer than I did, it was the 15-minute video package chronicling her life in the world of pro wrestling. From when she was a little baby crying after seeing the aftermath of her mother's hardcore match with blood all over her mother's face, and her mother reassuring her that she's okay, to the star that she became in pro wrestling, all the while her star was still growing. And if that wasn't enough to break you, then the 10-bell salute with Kyoko Kimura in the center of the ring, holding a portrait of Hana while Jungle Kiona, tears in her eyes and all, rang the bell herself, had to have you at least feeling some type of way, right? I had to bring up my barriers for that one. It was moments like that which gave me pause, because I wasn't sure whether or not I was prepared for moments that got really heavy. And remarkably, the show didn't end with those heavy moments like you'd come to expect. The final video package of the night came in the form of the tagline of the show, Matane, a phrase in Japanese that means "see you soon," where countless wrestlers, family, and friends of Hana said that very phrase and nothing else, a compilation of people simply saying "see you soon" that ended with the words "everyone loves Hana, Hana loves you" in text. That had to have helped so many people heal. It was powerful. As the video package was playing, though, I debated saying Matane in this review because I wasn't sure that I was someone, as a fan of her work and as someone that didn't know her personally, would have any meaning or impact in saying that phrase. That is until the video package ended completely and the first shot after it was of the fans in Korakuen Hall. That's when I realized that even we as fans saw Hana Kimura, even if it was just Hana Kimura the wrestler, because Hana Kimura the wrestler was part of Hana the person. Even if it was in a small way, it was still clearly more who she was than Hana Kimura the tabloid headline will ever be, because she was so much more than that. I watched the entire event in English commentary with Ian Riccaboni and someone else that I didn't quite catch the name of, but I just have to say that they did an absolutely stellar job. Again, even with all the mistakes, given that for them this was the first time calling matches for some of the wrestlers on the show, especially in the Battle Royal, they both kept me so engaged and they kept me company throughout a show that would have been probably too tough for me to get through without them. I'd go as far as to say that their work on this show was the best commentary work that I've personally ever experienced in wrestling, just because of how much it meant to me as a fan hearing that I wasn't alone. With all of that being said, there wasn't any other option for the rating of the show. A 10 out of 10 show for me from top to bottom, and a new favorite of mine from now until forever. Still, I know that I'm not the only one that would trade the show for the person. I hope that through this event, people will internalize a lesson to be learned behind her tragedy and that we should be nicer to each other. This woman was far too young and far too talented to be made to feel so worthless. On some level, I wish that there was I wish that there was someone there to delete her accounts on social media for her and remind her how worthwhile she was to the world and more importantly to the people that loved her and to herself. Hana was the wrestler that got me into stardom and Joshi wrestling by proxy. She had that same X factor that made Jeff Hardy my favorite wrestler as a kid, just getting into wrestling and getting to experience that feeling again, even if only for a short while, meant a lot to me as a fan. I would have been there for the whole ride, from every tour event that she took part in, even if it were a completely meaningless tag team match that I've seen a million times, to the day that she finally won the big one, to wherever she would have gone in wrestling after that. She just had that kind of sway over a fan like me, and I know that I'm far from the only one. Today, as I'm writing this, it's like the air is a little bit different. I can't describe it other than a similar vibe that all of her matches had, but much stronger. I remember when Kobe passed away. A friend of mine who was a fan of his told me that the air felt different on that day that he got the news. I can't exactly remember if I had the same feeling on that day that Hannah passed, but 1 year later, especially when discussing this very tribute show, I can feel it now. I wish I could describe the feeling other than Hannah's trademark colors, but just a bit softer. I guess that there really isn't much else to say other than what thousands of people have said through this show. I miss her whenever she crosses my mind. She had this whole wrestling business in the palm of her hand, and I'm grateful for the short time that I was able to experience her work while she was still here. And through her work, she'll never be gone completely. We miss you, Hannah, and we're more than happy to keep your memory alive in any way that we can. Matane.